The coins hit the counter and scattered across the floor, and 31 people in line watched a grown man drop to his knees to gather them while his 6-year-old daughter tried to hide behind his jacket. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in stories that remind us who we really are, hit like, drop a comment, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Now, let's begin. The morning sun had barely climbed over the rooftops of Millbrook when Grayson Cole pushed open the door of Halden's grocery, his daughter Nora's small hand wrapped tightly around his own. He had counted the coins 3 times in the truck before walking in, $7.40, every cent he had left until Friday, when his paycheck from the auto shop would finally clear. It wasn't much, but it was enough for bread, a small carton of eggs, and the strawberry yogurt Nora had been asking for since Tuesday. Grayson had been raising Nora alone for 2 years, ever since her mother left in the middle of the night with nothing but a note that said she needed to find herself. He never spoke badly about her to Nora. He simply woke up every day, went to work with grease under his fingernails, came home to cook dinner, helped with homework, and tucked his daughter into bed with the same worn-out teddy bear she'd had since she was 2. He wasn't a man who complained. He was a man who endured. That morning, as he placed his items on the counter, the cashier, a heavy-set man named Walter Higgins, who also happened to be the store's owner, looked at the small pile of groceries with a curled lip. "That's $4.12, Walter said flatly, his eyes already narrowing with the kind of judgment that comes easily to men who have never had to count coins in their palm before speaking. Grayson nodded, reaching into his jacket pocket, and carefully placed a small stack of coins and crumpled dollar bills onto the counter. He began counting them out loud, softly, the way a man counts money when he is embarrassed but has no other choice. Behind him, the line was growing, a mother with a toddler, an elderly woman with a cane, 2 teenagers scrolling on their phones. Grayson could feel their eyes on his back, but he kept counting. "Are you serious right now?" Walter said loudly, loud enough for the whole store to hear. "I don't have time to wait for you to dig through your pockets like a beggar. This is a store, not a charity." A few people chuckled awkwardly. Nora's grip on her father's jacket tightened, her small face turning red with the kind of shame no 6-year-old should ever have to feel. Grayson's hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained calm. "I have it, sir. Just give me a second." He placed the last coin down, a nickel, completing the exact amount. But Walter, irritated and wanting to make a show of his frustration, swept his arm across the counter, sending the coin scattering across the tile floor with a loud metallic clatter. "Pick it up and get out of my store," Walter snapped. "I don't need people like you slowing down my line." The store went silent. Grayson felt his chest tighten, not from anger, but from the humiliation of his daughter watching him kneel on a dirty floor, picking up nickels and dimes while strangers stared. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply got down, gathered every coin with steady hands, stood back up, and placed the money gently on the counter once more. "Here," he said quietly. "Exact change." It was at that exact moment that the glass door chimed, and a black car pulled up outside, sleek, imported, clearly expensive, out of place on the modest street of Millbrook. The man who stepped out wore a tailored navy suit, and though no one in the store recognized him immediately, something about the way he carried himself made people instinctively lower their voices. His name was Julian Ashford, and he was the CEO of Ashford Industries, a manufacturing conglomerate that had quietly become one of the largest employers in the state. Julian rarely visited small towns like Millbrook, but that morning he had stopped for gas and decided, on a whim, to grab a coffee from the store nearby. He walked in just as Walter was sneering at Grayson, just as Nora's eyes welled up with tears she was trying so hard to hold back. Julian stopped in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He watched as Grayson, humiliated but composed, slid the coins across the counter one final time. He watched as Walter rolled his eyes and mumbled something under his breath about people who can't afford to shop here. And in that moment, something inside Julian Ashford, a man who had built an empire from nothing, who remembered what it felt like to count pennies as a boy growing up in a two-room apartment with his mother, ignited. "Excuse me," Julian said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that silenced the store instantly. "Is this how you treat your customers?" Walter blinked, momentarily confused by the interruption. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns me now," Julian said, stepping forward. He looked at Grayson, who stood frozen, unsure of what was happening. Then Julian looked down at Nora, whose small hand was still trembling as she clutched her father's sleeve. Something in the girl's eyes, a mixture of fear and quiet dignity, reminded him of himself at that age, standing beside his own mother in a grocery store decades ago, praying the cashier wouldn't announce out loud that they were short on cash. "What's your name?" Julian asked gently, kneeling slightly to meet Nora's eyes. "Nora," she whispered. "Nora, that's a beautiful name." He smiled warmly, then stood and turned to Grayson. "And you, sir?" "Grayson Cole," he replied, still uncertain why a man in an expensive suit was suddenly involved in his humiliation. Julian turned to Walter, his expression hardening. "You just embarrassed a father in front of his daughter over a few dollars. Do you have any idea how many people in this town struggle every single day just to put food on the table? And instead of showing basic human decency, you chose to humiliate one of them for entertainment." Walter's face flushed red, stammering for a response, but Julian wasn't finished. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a checkbook, the kind most people only see in movies. He began writing, the pen moving with deliberate, unhurried strokes, while the entire store watched in stunned silence. He tore the check from the book and placed it on the counter, not toward Walter, but toward Grayson. "This is for you," Julian said. "Not charity. An investment." Grayson looked down and felt his knees nearly give out. The check read $1 million, made out directly to Grayson Cole. "I don't understand," Grayson whispered, his voice cracking. "I can't accept this. I don't even know you." Julian placed a firm but gentle hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to know me to deserve dignity. I watched you kneel down and pick up every coin without saying a cruel word back. I watched you protect your daughter's heart even while your own was breaking. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of man you are. This isn't about pity, Grayson. This is about giving a good man the chance he deserves." Julian went on to explain, his voice steady enough for the whole store to hear, that Ashford Industries had recently opened a new division needing skilled workers, men who understood hard work, patience, and integrity, qualities that couldn't be taught, only lived. He offered Grayson not just the check, but a position within the company, a real career, a future far beyond the walls of a small auto shop. Nora, still clutching her father's jacket, looked up with wide eyes, unsure if this was real or a dream. Grayson knelt down beside her, tears finally slipping down his face, not from sadness this time, but from a relief so overwhelming it physically hurt. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," he whispered. "Everything is going to be okay." The other customers in the store, who moments earlier had watched in awkward silence as Grayson was humiliated, now stood witnessing something far greater, a reminder that kindness, patience, and quiet strength do not go unnoticed, even when the world seems determined to overlook them. As for Walter, he stood behind the counter, pale and speechless, watching the very man he mocked walk out of his store with a future brighter than anything he could have imagined that morning. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that kindness is never wasted, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House so we can continue telling stories that matter. And before we go, I have a special request. In the comments below, write the words, "Kindness wins," if you believe that good things eventually find good people. Grayson Cole walked out of that store that morning not as a man who had been humiliated, but as a father who had been seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. And sometimes, that is all it takes to change the entire course of a life, one person willing to notice, one person willing to care, and one small act of dignity restored in a world that so often forgets to look twice.